Thank you. Thank you very much. It's lovely to be with you. I've just travelled up from Southampton, which should be nice and easy, but there is maintenance works on practically every line and 7 changes of train to get here with you. But there you go. I'm here, and I'm sure that you've had a wonderful day together. And I'm going to talk probably for 3/4 of an hour, and then have a 1/4 of an hour for questions. Can I say also that I will be around for a little while bit at the end to talk individually if people want to talk individually, although I need at some stage to head back on my 7 more trains to get back home. Okay, I'm going to tell you a bit of our story. I was away speaking at a series of events when I got the call from my wife. She said, "You need to come home now. It's Lizzie, our then 14-year-old daughter. She's in hospital and it's serious." I cancelled everything, rushed home as fast as I could, got to the hospital with flowers in my hand and fear in my heart, because I knew that she'd been developing anorexia nervosa. She'd been diagnosed some months before. We knew that she was still continuing to restrict her food intake and engage in excessive exercise. But the nature of eating disorders is that they are very secretive. People hold on to them in themselves, and they find it hard to talk about or be honest. And particularly with the case of anorexia nervosa, what someone experiences is like an anorexic voice in the head that is talking, and Lizzie describes it as, imagine your worst bully in the playground who's constantly in your head, but you've also come to believe that this is your only friend and you must hold on to it. Technically it's called egosyntonic. It's an egosyntonic disorder, which means that there is a perceived benefit for the person who's experiencing it. And so Lizzie was secretly still continuing to restrict, and she had collapsed very quickly. When I got to the hospital, the doctor took me aside and said, "You do realise your daughter could die." She had become so ill so quickly. Now thankfully she didn't die. The hospital stabilised her. She went on for 6 months in an inpatient unit and then years in community care, and she is now happy, healthy and fully recovered. But it was a 10-year journey. Through that time, she continued her education, got to medical school and qualified as a doctor. And soon after qualifying as a doctor, she called me and she said, "Dad, the Royal College of Psychiatrists has asked me to give a speech at their annual conference on eating disorders." I said, "That's fantastic, darling." She said, "No, they're all going to be consultants and world experts, and I'm an F1, if you know what that is, the junior, like 1 rung above the penis, So I'm just like there, and they're all experts." She said, "Dad, can you come along with me?" And she's married, but sometimes you want your dad, don't you? So I said, "Yeah, I'll come with you." And I brought along a friend of mine who was a publisher. And so he sat there listening to her. Well, she was just brilliant. She went down an absolute storm. She got a standing ovation, actually. And afterwards, over coffee afterwards, the publisher signed her up to write her book. And so she's written the book, which is over there on the bookstore, Life Hurts, A Doctor's Personal Journey Through Anorexia. And we thought, well, if it helps one person, it would have been helpful. That's just kind of the attitude we had. Little did we realise what would happen. Even before it was published, the Daily Mail bought the serialisation rights. When it then came out in the Mail, that led to loads and loads of media stuff, TV, radio, every newspaper you can imagine. And what they were particularly interested in was the father-daughter story, because typically with eating disorders in particular, dads tend not to be engaged. They tend to remain cognitively detached, to find it hard conceptualizing it as an illness and feeling that it's women's business. I'm more or less quoting there from an article in The Lancet that came out last year that's summarising some research on that. And here was a dad who'd been intimately involved, but also a dad who by background was a psychologist. I'm a member of the British Psychological Society, and yet it had happened to us. Why is it that you can know the theory, but when it comes practically in your own home, somehow we miss it. It's like that story of the frog. If you put a frog into boiling water, it will jump out. Don't do this, by the way. This is not an experiment I'm suggesting, right? Okay, but if you did, it would jump out. Whereas if you put a frog in cold water and gradually heated it, it would stay there until it died. And perhaps I could say it was partly that. But my background in psychology, me being the dad, Lizzie, her medicine, and her having gone through it, so our joint lived experience. So we started doing all sorts of media stuff, and we'd just come out of BBC Victoria Derbyshire show. And if you go, that's still there, if you go onto the Family Mental Wealth Facebook page, just search Facebook Family Mental Wealth, then you'll find the interview there about helping dads, helping through eating disorders. And we're just coming out of the BBC studios, and Lizzie said to me, "Dad, you've spent your whole life building charities and social enterprises and businesses. Why don't we start a social enterprise to help families invest in their mental health and well-being?" And in a moment of foolishness, I said, "Yes, darling, let us." Not realizing what she really was saying was, "Why don't you build one, and I'll carry on as a full-time doctor, and occasionally I'll do some TV and stuff, and I will write as well." So I now work for my daughter, okay, and can I say, I'm 63 years old. You're looking at me thinking, are you? Do you know, on the train on the way up, I was showing my train ticket, and it's got a senior rail card discount on it, and he said, "Can I see your senior rail card?" Very nice age ID that was. Anyway, I'm working hard. I worked harder in the last 2 years as we've developed Family Mental Wealth than I think before. We're creating lots of resources, working in partnership with King's College London, University of Southampton, Mental Health Foundation, all sorts of different organisations doing things together. But it all stems from Lizzie's book. So the book's on the bookshelf over there. I will just read you a little bit from early on, where she's telling what's happened early. She just called my wife to pick her up from school because she wasn't feeling well. By the time Mum picked me up, the agony was overwhelming. When we got home, she tried to give me some water, but I couldn't touch it. When you're living with anorexia, you experience overwhelming fears that make you see the worst in everyone and everything. As Mum offered me the glass of water, a thought immediately rushed into my mind. She stirred sugar into that. It's full of calories. Don't touch it. So I didn't. At that time, the anorexia had such a control over my mind that I'd hardly eaten or drunk anything for days. I couldn't even brush my teeth because of intrusive thoughts telling me that toothpaste has calories in it. Now you might listen to that and think, well, that last bit, that sounds really strange. But all illnesses sound strange if we don't understand them. But with mental illnesses, it's not just the strangeness, it's also the stigma. A debilitating feature of mental illnesses is that the person living with it and the family who are affected by it tend to feel isolated and alone, like a failure living in a world of successes. You know, the trouble is we cover up so many things, don't we? And we try to give a good impression, especially if you're on Instagram and you want to be the perfect Instagram family. Well, I'm not, by the way. Neither on Instagram nor the perfect Instagram family, I can say. But we want to just hide. But actually, inside, each of us as families are facing struggles. Yeah, Mind, the mental health charity, says that the statistics show that 1 in 4 people experience a mental health condition. Now, if that's the case, most families have more than 4 people in them. So therefore, most families will be experiencing it with them. Well, certainly, however one defines, and we'll look a little bit about that when I come later, about how one handles the issue of diagnosis and how one recognizes, we talk about mild, moderate, severe, however one categorizes in that. The fact is that we need to be able to be supportive of one another and our families as we are going through this. That's why Lizzie and I believe it's important to be open about it. You know, well, in many ways, we'd rather just box it up and put it in the past and get on with our lives. But we don't. We talk about it, we write about it, because we want to help other people to learn from the story, learn from the experience, learn also from my experience of just not engaging early enough, not taking notice early enough. My wife noticed much earlier. I didn't listen to my wife. I'm probably unique as a husband. But I didn't listen to my wife. I didn't take it seriously enough early on. And sometimes when I talk about it, I say there's an old saying, if you can't be a good example, you can at least be a dreadful warning. So there we go. But our journey is based around my daughter's experience of anorexia, her journey through it to health and recovery. But many of the principles can be applied to other mental health conditions as well. I speak quite a lot in schools and businesses. In schools, we have a presentation called From Risk to Resilience, which identifies how we do a session. When I say we, it's the same as today. It's me speaking with videos of my daughter, because she's in the hospital somewhere, working huge hours. Do pray for your doctor, friends, and nurses and other health professionals. The hours they do. So from risk to resilience, identifying risk factors that can lead to someone being vulnerable to an eating disorder or other mental health issue, and then how we can help to build resilience within a school community. So that's a presentation we do, I do in schools, and then I also do one in corporates as well. I've done quite a lot of the big companies in the City of London called Building Your Family Mental Health and Wellbeing, where we're looking at how you can invest in the mental health and well-being of the employees' families. And you know, there's a simple business case for this, right? And the commercial world is opening up to this and recognizing there's a business case for this. Because, like, you know, right, if you're a parent here, you know that if your child gets the flu, you're going to find it hard to work for a week. If your child breaks a leg, you're going to find it hard to work for a month. If your child develops a serious mental health issue, you might find it difficult to work for years. And so it makes sense for employers to invest in the mental health and well-being of the families of their staff members. So when we do that, we have a detailed handbook that everyone gets given. This gives them lots of detail that they can take away. Now, I don't know why I told you that, because I'm really sorry. This is like giving someone a present and taking it away, isn't it? I'm sorry, because I'm not doing that today, okay? And you don't get the handbook. Sorry, but I do have copies of the brochures for the corporate one and the schools one, and they're there, they're free if you want to take those away. If you're involved in a school, a governor, a teacher, whatever, or if you're involved in a business and you think, I want to do something for my employees' families, then do come and take those away. But the reason that I'm not doing that, Family Mental Wealth is not a faith-based organisation. It is an organisation we work in partnership with organisations, different NHS trusts and universities. Most of our staff members, most of our team who work with us are not Christians. So when we're doing these presentations, they're about the medical and psychological issues. But myself and my daughter are both Christians. And I'm conscious that what you're doing here today is you're looking at that faith dimension in mental health and well-being. And so I want to, instead of going through in detail that, I want to do a little bit of some of the kind of things that we do in the corporates and schools, but then spend a bit more time thinking about the faith dimension. Although Family Mental Wealth that my daughter and I founded with my wife as well, it's a little family business, really. We're just a simple family trying to help other families. That's basically what we are. Although, you know, my wife, my daughter and myself are all Christians, and I'm wildly enthusiastic about being Christians, in the situations we work, we're purely doing the medical and the psychological, but let's spend a bit more time today looking at the faith side. But I'll do a little bit from it, because, you know, it's hard to understand what's going on in the mind of somebody who's developing an eating disorder, particularly anorexia nervosa. And you're thinking, well, how did it come? Why can't they stop? And I asked my daughter one day to come up with an illustration that would help us understand. And of course it's a horse illustration, because my daughter is mad on horses. If she's not writing or broadcasting or doctoring most of the time, she's riding her horse. And so she said, imagine this. Imagine you're walking over the hillside and you see in the distance a beautiful horse. It's a sleek, brown, beautiful horse, like you've always dreamed of. And you walk towards it, and as you get close, the horse turns around and looks at you, and you think, yes, a friendly horse. And as you get closer, the horse nuzzles into you, and you think, yes, this is a lovely horse. And then you think, I fancy a ride. And you hop up on the horse's back, and it feels comfortable and secure. The best horse you've ever been on. You feel happy. You give it a little kick and it starts walking, and you're thinking, yes, I'm riding this beautiful horse along. And then you give it another kick to move it into trot, but instead of trotting, it goes straight into canter and gallop, and it gallops really fast, and it's tearing over the fields, and you're holding on for dear life, and you're looking down at the ground, which is hurtling past you, and you are desperately scared, and your friends and family are nearby, and they're shouting, get off the horse! Don't stay on that horse, get off the horse. But you can't get off the horse. You are holding on for dear life. That's an illustration of how quickly it can take off and what it feels like on the inside. But when Lizzie was 16 and she'd just come out of the long stay inpatient unit, she produced a short film for BBC Children in Need, talking about what it felt like for her at that age when she was in the middle of her recovery. So I'm going to play this for you now.
Why don't you just eat? Didn't they realise I couldn't? Didn't they think I wanted to get better from the terrible life I was living? The way I could never get warm, the bed sores down my spine, the inability to sit down. Didn't they realise I hated it? Didn't they think I did see it was terrible when I was admitted to hospital, became a prisoner in a hospital room, with the windows screwed shut and nurses watching me all the time? Didn't they realise I hated it? Didn't they see the pain it caused me to be kept in a hospital for months with no privacy, needing a nurse to accompany me to the toilet to avoid me throwing up, having my room searched with no personal belongings left untouched? Didn't they realise I hated it?
At the time that Lizzie produced that, she had just come out of the inpatient unit. She had been fed quite substantially, and she was weight restored, but not thought restored. She still had a long journey to go to become thought restored. You see, there's a difference between those. Being weight restored is one thing, being thought restored is another. And the fact is that eating disorders are not really about food. People get surprised by it. It's not really about food. Food becomes a means of comfort or control. Eating disorders are more about what's going on in the mind than what's going on in the stomach. And to enter in and to understand what is going on in the mind and why it is that they feel like this when they're going through, someone feels like this when they're going through an eating disorder. It takes time. It takes time to reflect and understand and listen and engage to them. And that was difficult for our family, our wider family, for them to understand, to gain the insights. See, many in the wider family said, why doesn't she just eat? Why doesn't she just eat? They thought that she was putting us through this dreadful ordeal because she was self-obsessed and didn't love us. But the fact is, they had to realise that she was putting us through this and herself through this because she didn't love herself and didn't think that she deserved nourishment. They thought that she was being defiant by refusing food until they gained insight into the fact that she experienced overwhelming feelings of guilt whenever she did eat. Like that bully, the worst playground bully who's in your head all the time, bullying you, but yet feeling you've got to hold on to it because actually this is your only friend. Now, our story is about anorexia nervosa, but there are a number of different categories of eating disorder, diagnoses of eating disorders. In the DSM-5, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, there are 7 different ones, but the 3 most common are anorexia nervosa, bulimia nervosa, and binge eating disorder. And the overall definition in the DSM-5 and indeed the ICD-10, which is the other international classification of diseases, persistent disturbance of eating or eating-related behaviour that results in the altered consumption or absorption of food and that significantly impairs physical health or psychosocial functioning. Let me just give you a quick overview of these diagnoses. Anorexia nervosa, persistent restriction of food intake, often combined with excessive exercise, deep fear of weight gain, a distorted body image, associated with a strong feeling of a strong need to feel in control. The sad thing about anorexia nervosa is that it has the highest mortality rate of all mental health conditions. More people die of anorexia nervosa than any other mental health condition. Thankfully, our daughter came through it, but actually many that she met on the journey didn't. When she came out of the long stay inpatient unit, she was given a beautiful leaving book. All the different people that she'd met there in the time had written messages for her, drawn drawings and poems. It was beautiful. And she still has it and treasures it to this day. But on the other hand, she also feels deeply sad when she reads it, because it reminds her of those she met on the journey who didn't make it. There's a tragedy in our culture where anorexia is almost joked about, seen as something to be flirted with, seen to be welcomed. It's certainly, there is nothing glamorous about it. It will ruin your life. Even though she came through and continued her education and got to medical school and saved her life and is physically well now, she says, looking back on it, all that she lost in her teenage years, the time when she could have gone to parties, but she didn't. The time when she could have gone on holiday with friends, but she didn't. All the fun things she could have done as a teenager, but she didn't because she was stuck in hospital or at home, just trapped by these thoughts and fears about food. Bulimia nervosa is characterized by a binge-purge cycle, a highly distressing binge in which the person consumes a large volume of food in a short period of time, feeling out of control and disconnected from reality, often eating food that was previously avoided, and then a subsequent purge. Now, people think about purging with bulimia nervosa as, people make themselves vomit. There are other ways in which people purge through laxatives, through exercise, or a period of fasting afterwards. But the point is, whatever's that binge-purge cycle format, it is deeply distressing. Leads to huge feelings of guilt and shame, and massive mood swings and low self-esteem. It does damage to the body. Some of it is cosmetic, like acid affecting the teeth, but some of it is much more dangerous because the repeated patterns of binging and purging can cause a disturbance in the internal electrolyte system, leading to cardiac arrhythmia and the risk of sudden death. Let me tell you a story, true story, but I'm changing her name. I'll call her Mary. Mary was 16 years old, doing well at school, just got her GCSE results, got all A's. Her mum and dad were so thrilled with her, she had a great future ahead of her, but no one knew that she was suffering from bulimia. Her parents didn't know, her teachers didn't know that she was regularly eating and making herself sick. Her friends had spotted something, but her friends didn't know and didn't understand and didn't know how to spot the signs and what to do. They went out for a meal the night after that she got her results, a great celebration meal, had this wonderful feast together. They went home, Mary went to her bedroom. Next morning, she didn't come down. They went up to her room and found her dead in bed. The repeated pattern of binging and purging had so affected the internal electrolytes in her blood that she had a sudden heart had suddenly stopped. Her parents didn't know what was going on. Her friends didn't understand what was going on. She thought it was okay. She probably felt well. She looked well. She probably felt okay. But this was affecting her. The third one, now this is an interesting one because, as was mentioned earlier actually, in the DSM-4, the earlier edition, binge eating disorder wasn't recognised as a psychiatric condition, whereas it is now. Now it's interesting to work out how that actually is being worked through and understood as an increase in research in this area, because it's not been researched. But actually, if you take it, their binge eating disorder, it is actually the most common of the eating disorders, and yet the least well known, and on which there is the most stigma, because people say, oh, well, it's just someone being greedy or not having no self-control. But actually, for those who experience it, it's an overwhelming, overpowering compulsion to binge that they wish they couldn't. They wish they could control. They wish they could stop it. It affects their psychosocial functioning as they are then just living with it every moment of the day. It affects their physical health as well because, of course, they put on large amounts of weight. So it's a highly distressing binge that's similar in some ways to with bulimia nervosa, except that the eating takes place in a rapid mechanical way. This is not sitting down and polishing off a pizza on a Friday night. This is not enjoying a nice meal. This is a rapid binging with no subsequent purging, and accompanied by a feeling of inability to stop eating even when excessively full. It's associated with high levels of guilt and shame and even disgust at their own lack of control. Let me tell you about Sarah. Again, not her name. Sarah's in her mid-30s. Apparently she's got everything going for her. She's got a nice family, nice husband, nice job, and but every day her mind is overtaken with this drive to binge. When she's at work, she's thinking, I'm not going to do it today. I'm not going to. I'm going to resist it. But as the day goes on, it becomes stronger and stronger and more overpowering. And when time comes to go home, she goes to 3 different shops to buy binge food because she doesn't want it to be noticed how much she's buying. But she goes to those shops, buying the binge food, takes it home, hides it in secret, and then eats it secretly in her bedroom, in the garden, even in the toilet. And feeling just so trapped by this. And then the dreadful, of course, physical consequences of the increasing weight. Now, when you look at that and you think, anyone who experiences that in their family, they will think, I just don't know how it came about and what I can do to make a difference. When Lizzie was very ill, thankfully, because of my background in psychology, I could read the literature, understand what the best evidence-based understanding of it was, and be able then to work out how to apply and how to help Lizzie. But most families are not in that situation. And so one of the first things we did when we started Family Mental Wealth is we said, it's like people feel they're in a jungle without a map. You know, if you've had a family member who has suddenly developed a mental health condition, you will feel like that. I'm in a jungle. How did I get here? How do I get out of here? Where do I go? And we said, well, the first thing to do then is to actually create a map, a framework for family support, as we call it. Now, here it is as applied to eating disorders, but it can equally apply to pretty much all other mental health conditions. Well, not all of them, but a large number of them it can apply to as well. It's on the Family Mental Wealth website, as is this video, which I will show you now.
How does a happy, healthy child with so much to live for become trapped by an eating disorder which destroys life? There are many risk factors that can make someone vulnerable to an eating disorder. For example, these might include body dissatisfaction, being unhappy with how one looks, and self-oriented perfectionism, setting oneself very high standards. One might then experience weight-based bullying and struggle to achieve self-set high standards. These stressors acting on the risk factors might lead to altered eating with restricted food intake. This might then progress into seriously disordered eating with life-threatening consequences. The disordered eating produces physical as well as psychological changes, such as a disturbance of interoception, which is the process by which we experience internal sensations, like how we feel when we eat. And these lead to comorbidities, such as depression, anxiety, obsessions and compulsions. And together these form a downward spiral with life-destroying consequences, unless effectively treated. But there is hope. It is possible to break out of this process. I know, because this was my history. Now in my present, I'm a doctor, using my medical knowledge and lived experience to help others. I have developed this framework to describe the process of an eating disorder. Although the exact route through will be different for different people, it can be used as a guide to help others, especially for families, friends and teachers, who each can play an important role at 3 key stages of the process: turning risk into resilience, spotting the signs, and changing the focus.
So when I am speaking in schools and corporates, what I do is I say, okay, let's look at those 3 areas. We'll talk about how we can turn risk into resilience, how we can spot the signs. That first one, of course, technically is called primary prevention. How do you stop an illness from beginning? The second one, spotting the signs, is technically called secondary prevention. How do you prevent an illness from progressing once it begins? And the third one, of course, which is your engagement in treatment. But as I said, I'm not going to do that with you, but I am going to look at 4 reflections. And there's a picture of the very happy day when my daughter graduated as a doctor. So 4 reflections, particularly leading towards thinking from a faith perspective on these. The first one is being discerning about diagnoses. You know, when you hear the statistic, which is often put around these days, and I don't have a reason to doubt it, when you hear the statistic that 10% of children aged 5 to 16 have a clinically diagnosable mental disorder, when you hear that statistic and you're a parent, of course one feels worried. Because you think, naturally, if my child begins to show any sign of a mental distress or mental ill health or mental disorder in any way, we feel that we must go to the doctor to get a diagnosis. In the same way that you will with anything else. Your child's got a cold, snuffling, you think, oh, I better take him to the doctor. We're looking for a diagnosis. Now, certainly, it is well established that early intervention is valuable for a full and sustained recovery from mental illness. That is evidentially well established. It prevents what's called the 3 C's, which is complications, i.e. someone like Lizzie developing this dreadful, almost fatal physical collapse because of it. So it prevents complications, comorbidities, which is other illnesses, other psychiatric illnesses developing alongside, and thirdly, chronicity, that it actually becomes almost impossible to stop and prevent. I would say almost impossible, because there are those who will say, once you've had a mental illness like an eating disorder for such a long time, you're never going to ever be free of it. I can tell you, Lizzie will say, yes you can. The statistics show that if people don't get adequate treatment to recover in that first 3 years after the onset of an eating disorder, then actually it's very difficult to recover afterwards. But Lizzie says, I'm living proof that after 3 years I wasn't well. It's taken me 10 years to get well, but I am now well. So we know that early intervention reduces or averts the risk of chronicity, complications and comorbidities. But this rush to try and get a diagnosis medicalising it through a clinical diagnosis is not a panacea for all of life's mental health problems. Let me give you a few reasons why we need to be discerning about it. Once we get a diagnosis, and I hear a lot of parents talk about, I need to get a diagnosis for my son. Once I get a diagnosis, what are you going to do? What do you think is going to happen then? Well, we know what happens. If my son has got a pain here, and he's doubled up with pain, and I take him to the hospital, and they say, yes, we've checked, yes, diagnosis is appendicitis, I know what happens. The surgeons put him into the operating theatre, the surgeons operate on him, and they fix him. And what do? I sit in the waiting room drinking, I drink a health food drink called barley cup, actually, I would highly recommend it. I don't drink coffee and tea. But I sit in the waiting room doing nothing because there's nothing for me to do. So therefore, if we get a diagnosis for our child's mental health challenges, we might expect to watch passively from the sidelines, missing the opportunity for family-based proactive self-care, which is why Lizzie and I have set up Family Mental Wealth. FamilyMentalWealth.com, not Family Mental Health, because wealth is a play on words of health and well-being. Okay, so FamilyMentalWealth.com, which is all about helping families invest in their in proactive self-care with or without clinical interventions. We're really working at the area of mild to moderate mental health issues, not at the area of severe mental health issues when people are actually in a hospital. But if one was rushing to get a diagnosis, one might then think, there's nothing that I can do. And also the child may experience their own sense of impotence as they feel they're labelled with a permanent condition. On social media, I'm surprised and frankly shocked to see the number of young people on social media who put their diagnoses there almost like a badge, like a certificate. I am so-and-so, and I am OCD, anxiety, bipolar, whatever, as if they're a permanent description of which now defines them. That's not the case. Now, I'm thankful that for the work that's been done in all sorts of areas to reduce the stigma of mental health and increase resources, but as good as it is, and it is really, really good, that it's increasingly recognised that mental health is as important as physical health, we have to recognise it's not identical with physical health. Indeed, there is a strong argument that we shouldn't use the term diagnoses at all in mental illness because actually they are largely descriptive categories that clinicians use as a shorthand to refer to their perception of a pattern of symptoms. They're not equivalent to a blood test or a biopsy report. So be discerning about diagnoses. Early in Lizzie's recovery journey, my wife and I decided we would never describe her as an anorexic. Here is Lizzie, she is an anorexic. No, she isn't. She's Lizzie. She's Lizzie, a beautiful person, made in God's image, unique and beautiful. Yes, she is living through an eating disorder at the minute, but there's so much more to her than just this illness. She's got her whole life ahead of her. The diagnosis was indeed helpful in providing a pathway to treatment, but it should not define her as a person, and it should not disable us as parents. Secondly, be confident in your capacity. Increasingly, research shows the value of self-help and guided self-help for mental health, especially within the context of a family where family members have been equipped and with the skills to provide appropriate support. And let me say, in Family Mental Wealth, we use the term family in its broadest possible sense. There are many types of families, but there are also within our community many groupings of people that are like family. You know, a school family, the family of the school, the church family. When I'm speaking in a corporate in the City of London, I say, your millennials, your 20s and 30-year-olds, for many of them, their colleagues and friends that they socialise with are family to them. I'm old enough to remember when the TV series Friends first aired. There we go, there's my little thing. Now, was it a group of friends who spend their lives together? It could have been, instead of called friends, it could have been called family, because they were their family. Now, the evidence shows that supportive, informed self-help within that community group can be immensely effective. In terms of eating disorders, King's College Eating Disorders Research Group, who we work very closely with, they say this: we know from our research into the treatment of adolescents that targeted, family-based interventions aimed at mobilising the family's own resources are an effective alternative to inpatient treatment for young people. Lizzie will always say that she's thankful for the work of the medical professionals when she was in hospital, life-saving, and when she had a 6 months inpatient unit. But she said the most important thing actually is to equip people within a family environment. The government recently, in 2017, released its green paper, Transforming Children and Young People's Mental Health. And this is guiding the whole kind of government's initiative, Department for Education's initiative on mental health provision in schools. And they said this in the green paper, read it in the green paper: evidence-based treatments for mild to moderate levels of mental health disorders can be delivered by trained non-clinical staff with adequate supervision, leading to outcomes comparable to those of trained therapists. Later, the evidence highlights the important role of the family in ensuring successful interventions, with parental involvement improving the outcomes of many interventions. So be confident in your capacity. Thirdly, remain full of faith. Research by the Royal College of Psychiatrists, published a couple of years ago, has found, and I quote from it, about half of our patients with a mental health condition are turning to spirituality and religion to help them get through their mental health crisis. Indeed, the Royal College of Psychiatry had at that time set up a spirituality and psychiatry special interest group for really engaging them. Now, for me, that is wonderfully exciting, because when I studied psychology back in the 1970s, faith and psychiatry, or faith and psychology even, were seen as enemies rather than allies. But there's a growing body of research showing the mental health benefits of spirituality and religion. For example, I'll just give you one example, and for those of you who want to look it up, if you look at it's Akrawi, A-K-R-A-W-I, et al., Journal of Eating Disorders, 2015. What they did is a systematic review. Any of you have any academic background, you'll know that actually systematic reviews are the most important, that look at a whole range of different studies and systematise them together. Systematic review of 22 research studies concluded, this was amongst its conclusions: strong and internalised religious beliefs coupled with having a secure and satisfying relationship with God were associated with lower levels of disordered eating, psychopathology and body image concern. Let me just read that again, because that's in psychologist speak, right? Strong and internalised religious beliefs coupled with having a secure and satisfying relationship with God, what you and I would recognise as being a Christian in our experience, were associated with lower levels of disordered eating, psychopathology and body image concern. Certainly in Lizzie's case, very significant steps forward in her recovery journey came when I helped her to see the illness through the eyes of her faith. She describes it in her book. She describes it many times in her book. Page 64 tells a little bit about when she was actually in the hospital, the initial hospital for the crisis care. And she says there, when she was very ill, I'd come and I was sat with her as I was every day. Dad always carried a Bible in his jacket pocket, and as he sat on the bed he would ask me if I wanted to read some of it with him and to pray. I always said yes. And one of those readings was another little insight for me. Dad read from John's Gospel, chapter 10, in which Jesus said, "The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full." I recall after he read that verse, how he stopped and read it again, slowly and thoughtfully. We talked about it for a while, and I remember it dawning on me that anorexia was like a thief, stealing my illness, killing my joy. That night I wrote in my diary, "I must stop, otherwise the thief will destroy my life. This is not fair. God and my family love me, and that's all that matters." And if you read her book, you will see through her medical reflections on her journey and her biographical story that she tells, she has these spiritual reflections where she's reflecting back on actually her spiritual journey through it. You'll see that in the book. You won't see it, by the way, in the Daily Mail serialization. That was edited out. Finally, hang on to hope. Hang on to hope. When Lizzie was very ill, my wife and I felt that we were in a dark tunnel with no hope. We used to go for a walk. We live right by the university in Southampton, right by the campus. And we would go for a walk. I tell you, one of the practical things, if you're looking for something to help a family who are got a member that's got a mental health issue in your church, right? Ask them what would help them. Ask them what would help them. And I tell you what helped us. Maybe the same for them, maybe different. What helped us when Lizzie was very ill was that we had friends from the church who would come and sit for an hour every night with Lizzie. Because she had to have 3 meals a day and 3 snacks a day, and she had to be sat with to make sure that she wouldn't then exercise or vomit afterwards. And that was immensely. Can you imagine what that is like? 3 meals, 3 snacks a day. You have to sit with your daughter, and you can't leave her. And her friends came, and they would just sit for that hour. And having that break each day was immensely helpful. When you're caring for a family member, a loved one who's going through a mental health condition, and you know it's long, it's not going to be quickly solved. You can't just call the doctor and have an injection or take a tablet. You know, it's years and years of this. And if we care about our brothers and sisters in the church, then we'll be looking for, how can I support you? And one of the things is, I think, to give people that little break, but also to help people to hang on to hope. You know, we used to feel as we went, as a friend would sit and we would go and walk on the campus, in the early days we'd say we feel like we're in a dark tunnel. We can't see the light. We can't see the way out. In fact, we would say, I'm not sure it is a tunnel. I think it's a cave. We're just going deeper and deeper into this cave. But the evidence shows that hope for recovery is a very important protective factor in recovery from a mental health condition. So having hope for recovery actually is a significant factor to help people recover, so they don't give up hope, to have hope. And the same applies also within the family, to hold on to that hope. So how do you hold on to hope when you feel despair? Well, what made a difference for us when we went from thinking it's just a cave, we're never going to get out of that, to thinking, no, there is hope, there is a future? Well, sometimes what can help is true stories of other people who've gone through a mental health condition, which is why Lizzie wrote her story. People might find that helpful. But for me, what was particularly helpful was the Bible passage in Psalm 30. Psalm 30, I hung on to. Psalm 30 says this, verse 8, "Weeping may stay for the night, but rejoicing comes in the morning." Weeping may stay for the night, but rejoicing comes in the morning. I wrestled with that verse. I can't tell you how many hours I wrestled with that verse, because I kept saying, God, please, God, when is that morning of rejoicing coming? Every day that morning of rejoicing did not come. When is it going to come? But when you gain insight into the fact that, you know, a day is like 1,000 years with the Lord. He doesn't live in the same day, kind of each day as us. He's got an eternal perspective. And you realize that actually there will be that great, glorious morning of rejoicing. But you also realize that God comes to be with us in our suffering. It's the whole message of the incarnation of Christ coming to be with us in this world. For transformation, we've got a hope for the future, but also a presence with us now, and actually beginning to recognize that there wasn't one sudden morning of great joy I should be waiting for, but rejoicing in each little moment of great joy, each little moment of small joys, each little progression along the way. And I learned to be thankful for each one. I learned to celebrate each one. And as Lizzie was fighting against the illness and fighting to recover, she said that became significant for her, because it may have only seemed like a little thing. Yeah, she ate that muffin. Yeah, she didn't go off and exercise. How much fighting did that take for her in her mind? And we were celebrating that with her and affirming her and encouraging her and experiencing that joy, that great joy, that of even the little things, step by step. And as a community in the church, I hope that we can celebrate also with one another and celebrate those joys, but also weep with those who weep. And recognise that sometimes, you know, we go backwards. And Lizzie describes in her book how she would take one step forward and 2 steps back. Well, okay, we still carry on. We're still celebrating that one step forward. We're enjoying being a family. I will close with a story. I use this story when I'm talking in the corporates, actually. It's a change in the my understanding, change in an illustration that I used to tell. I'm a very visual, illustrative kind of person, okay? And early on when Lizzie was ill, I felt it was my job as the dad to get her well. I'm a Mr. Fix-It kind of person, you know, I'm going to get her well. Little did I realise I couldn't. It's actually her job to do that. I'm there as, she's the principal actor, I'm just the supporting, you know, the supporting cast. But I used to say, it's like we're in a rowing boat, rowing hard to get up the river, and up the river is a place called Lizzie is Well Again. And it's my job as the dad to get her up there till she's well again. And I look round, I've been rowing that way, and I look round, she's rowing in the opposite direction. And then suddenly I thought, I've got the wrong goal. My goal, actually, is not to get Lizzie up there to that place where she's well again, because only she can do that on her journey. My goal is to keep us all together in the boat. That's what my goal is. And okay, if we're all together in the boat, okay, if we start drifting downstream a little bit, we're still together in the boat. And Lizzie, what she describes, she says it in the book, she says, I changed. She said, Dad changed when he had that insight, that realization. He changed from leading me on to cheering me on, and actually supporting me as only she could fight against this illness and achieve recovery. I said that I was going to give a lot of time for questions, but I'm sorry, once I start preaching, there you go. Anyway, but hopefully that's been helpful for you. Thank you.